For those of us who've spent, any time in the corporate world, the image of management consulting is pretty fixed, right?
Hmm.
High-priced experts, those complex frameworks.
And the PowerPoint. Don't forget the massive PowerPoint deck.
Oh yeah, the definitive PowerPoint, delivered after weeks, sometimes months of really intensive analysis. But what if that whole structure, decades old, isn't just like evolving slowly? What if it's actually being ripped apart by a huge technological shockwave?
It is. It really is. And the speed of this change, that's what makes it so critical to understand right now. We're not talking about just, simple automation tweaking things around the edges.
No.
No, this is a fundamental redefinition. It challenges the consultant's very self-understanding, their role, and frankly, the entire industry's business model. And it's being driven by AI, specifically autonomous agents and true cognitive systems.
Okay, so the sources we're diving into today, they really argue that the industry has reached its, quote, hour of truth. So this deep dive, it's basically required reading or listening into the blueprint for that revolution. It's laid out by Robert Meyer in his book, The AI Revolution in Consulting, Rethinking Consulting.
Right, and Meyer is, I think, uniquely positioned here. He's not just some academic watching from the sidelines. He spent over 15 years, actually, in the consulting trenches. And critically, he's now moving from just diagnosing the problem to actively building the solution.
Mablingit, how so?
He's developing a consulting as a service platform, CaaS they call it. It's slated to launch in 2026. So, he's not just talking about the revolution, he's implementing it. He's a consultant actively building the future of consulting.
It definitely gives his analysis some real weight. So, okay, our mission today seems pretty straightforward then. We need to understand exactly where that traditional consulting model is, well, crumbling.
Yeah, where the cracks are really showing.
And analyze the specific advanced technologies that are replacing it. Things like digital twins and this consulting graph concept.
And then map out the new economic structure, the new business models that define what Meyer calls his Blueprint 2030.
Right. We're essentially giving you, our listeners, the map you need to navigate what look like the next 5 really decisive years for this industry.
And we're talking directly to C-level executives and seasoned consultants themselves, people who need to shift their focus immediately away from just managing time and process.
The old way.
Yeah, the old way. And towards managing intelligence, managing outcomes. It's a totally different game.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So Meyer kicks things off with a pretty bold declaration. He says the traditional consulting model, weeks of analysis, then the big ritualized report delivery, it's just fundamentally unsustainable now.
Unsustainable, why?
Because 3 core pillars, the foundations that supported decades of, let's face it, very profitable, high-margin business, they're dissolving all at the same time. And they're basically victims of AI's, brutal efficiency.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with the one everyone kind of loves to hate. Pillar 1, the hourly model.
Right, the old equation. Professional competence times time spent equals value. Seems logical on the surface.
Yeah, makes sense initially.
But underneath, there's a systemic flaw, a really big one.
Which is?
It creates perverse incentives. The model actually, structurally, rewards complexity, inefficiency, and just dragging projects out longer.
Over speed and elegance and, actual quality.
Exactly. Think about it. If a consultant solves a really tough problem, something that looks like a 3-month job, but they crack it in 3 weeks, well, they've created a huge value for the client.
Right. Faster solution.
But they've basically penalized themselves economically. Fewer billable hours. The system itself is designed to favor, inertia, sticking with the long, complex path.
We've all seen that, right? The 400-page PowerPoint deck where, half those slides are just there for billable weight, not real insight.
Absolutely. And Meyer's analysis just cuts right through that dysfunction. He points out, if a consultancy invests its own money, its own R&D, developing proprietary tools, maybe complex algorithms, data tools, analytical templates.
Things that actually speed things up for the client.
Exactly. Innovation that benefits the client by accelerating the project.
Okay.
Well, under the old model, they're immediately punished with fewer billable hours and less revenue. It actively discourages that kind of efficiency gain.
So the system penalizes the very innovation it should be rewarding.
Precisely. He gives this great example in the book, a specialized advanced tool for pricing strategy analysis.
Okay.
Now, previously, doing this manually calculating price elasticities, competitive responses, revenue potential across different regions, it took a dedicated team maybe 3 weeks.
Okay, 3 weeks. What's that worth?
Well, at a conservative blended rate, say €4,000 per day, that's generating €60,000 in revenue for the firm. Solid engagement.
A good chunk of change. predictable.
Right. Now, imagine that same firm develops an AI-driven tool. It does the same comprehensive analysis, probably with higher accuracy, more depth, in 3 days.
Wow, 3 weeks down to 3 days. That's like an 80% efficiency gain for the client.
Huge gain for the client. But look at the consultancy's revenue. It plummets from 60,000 euros down to maybe 12,000.
Ouch.
So why, under that old hourly model, would the consultancy ever want to consistently implement this fantastic innovation? The system literally penalizes the efficiency improvement economically. It forces consultants to optimize for time, not for results.
And that bias, it goes deeper, doesn't it? It probably influences the type of recommendations consultants make.
Absolutely. It biases them towards suggesting these huge, complex, time-consuming transformation programs. Why? Because those generate the biggest fees.
Even if a simpler fix might be better.
Even if, objectively, a simple organizational tweak or maybe a targeted process overhaul would be faster, cheaper, and way less risky for the client. The economics push towards the 3-month project, not the elegant 2-week solution.
Okay, so that's pillar one crumbling under its own weight, basically. How does AI accelerate that collapse?
AI is the wrecking ball. Because when a well-trained cognitive agent can do that 2-week intensive market analysis, digging through regulatory docs, scraping unstructured data, benchmarking against thousands of companies, synthesizing a structured report.
How long does the AI take?
Maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the cost? Perhaps €50 in cloud computing capacity?
50 euros versus potentially tens of thousands for human time?
Exactly. The client is just going to stop paying for 80 hours of human time to do what an AI does in 2 hours for pocket change. That brutal efficiency just makes the hourly rate completely obsolete. It breaks the model.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So that naturally leads us to pillar two, this idea of knowledge asymmetry.
Yeah, for decades, a huge part of the consultant's perceived value was having this privileged knowledge.
The secret sauce.
Right. The proprietary internal databases, the codified best practices, and all those classic frameworks we learn about Porter's 5 Forces, the BCG matrix, you name it. Clients paid a premium for access to that secret treasure chest.
That information monopoly justified the high daily rates.
It did. But then came the large language models, GPT-4, Claude, whatever the next generation is. These things fundamentally democratize access to abstract knowledge.
How so?
Well, they were trained on literally trillions of data points, academic papers, research, case studies, the whole internet, basically. They make humanity's collective, abstract, codified knowledge available instantly, globally, to anyone with an internet connection.
Including the client.
Including the client. The monopoly is just gone.
It really is. I mean, if I, as a client, can now ask an AI, hey, what are the common failure modes for big digital transformations in old school banks? I get a pretty comprehensive, well-structured answer in seconds.
Instantly.
So doesn't that, I mean, at least on the surface, make the core analytical function of the consultant kind of superfluous, less necessary?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But Meyer argues very strongly, no, it doesn't make them superfluous. But it does fundamentally shift the value proposition.
Okay, shifts it how?
It moves away from just hoarding abstract knowledge, the what, to the much harder job of contextualizing and applying that knowledge to a messy, specific, real-world client situation. The AI gives you the facts. The human has to deal with the reality.
Facts versus reality. Can you give an example? I think Meyer uses a scenario about entering the Vietnamese market.
Yeah, that scenario illustrates it perfectly. So an AI agent, it can deliver, probably within minutes, incredibly comprehensive data, market size, competitors, projected growth rates, regulatory hurdles for entering Vietnam, all technically correct, factually robust.
Okay, sounds pretty useful. So why does the human consultant still need to fly out there?
Because the AI has zero access to the essential context. The internal politics, the human dynamics.
Like what specifically?
It doesn't know about the CEO's personal obsession with maintaining absolute quality control, which makes the idea of remote production psychologically really difficult for that specific CEO to accept.
The human element.
Exactly. The AI hasn't seen the internal email chains showing that the German plant managers are deeply unsettled, viewing any move to Vietnam as a direct threat to their own jobs and security.
Internal resistance.
Huge internal resistance. And crucially, the AI doesn't know about the company's previous high-profile failed outsourcing attempt in Thailand 5 years ago, a failure that still generates massive internal scar tissue and political friction whenever outsourcing comes up.
Okay, so the AI has the what the market data, but the human consultant brings the so what and the how.
Precisely. The human consultant's value is providing the intuition, navigating the organizational politics, assessing the cultural feasibility. They're essentially acting as the corporate psychologist and the risk manager in that situation.
They connect the generic knowledge from the AI with the specific internal context, the history, the culture, the personalities.
Yes, the asymmetry shifts. It's no longer about privileged access to abstract information. It's about the capacity for integration, transformation, and critically, managing the human element of change. The facts are cheap now. Applying them effectively, that's everything.
Okay, that makes sense. Pillar 1, hourly rates, gone. Pillar 2, knowledge asymmetry, eroded. What's Pillar 3?
Pillar 3, the tyranny of the PowerPoint deck.
Ah, yes. The sacred artifact.
For decades, that physical report was the central deliverable, right? A static, often hundreds of pages long document, meticulously curated to make sure the consultant controlled the narrative from beginning to end.
And that created problems too.
Oh, serious problems. It meant efforts focused on the presentation, the slick visuals, the consistent formatting, sometimes more than the underlying substance.
Style over substance.
Often, yeah. It also made the client a passive recipient. They were just forced to consume the consultant's pre-cooked narrative. And maybe most dangerously, it encouraged static thinking.
How so, static thinking?
Well, imagine the client is looking at the report and says, okay, but what if we change this one core assumption? Let's say sales growth isn't 10%. What if it's only 5%?
Right. A reasonable question.
Under the old model, that meant days, maybe weeks of work.
Yeah.
Rebuilding slides, rerunning the models, rewriting conclusions. The whole process bogged down.
So the process optimized for narrative control, not for robust, real-time decision-making.
Exactly. Meyer argues the future deliverable isn't the static report anymore. It's the interactive dynamic system. The role shifts dramatically, from being a persuasive storyteller to being a system designer and engineer.
Okay. That sounds like a big shift. Give us a tangible example. What does that actually look like in practice?
Let's go back to that pricing analysis example.
Okay.
Instead of delivering 150 slides explaining the optimal price point, the consultant provides a live, interactive dashboard.
A dashboard.
Yeah. The client can literally use sliders, input fields, whatever, to adjust the price points for, say, 3 different product lines. And immediately, they see the calculated impact on revenue, gross profit, market share updated in real time by the underlying AI model.
Ah, so the client can play with the variables themselves.
Instantly. And that's a game changer because it forces intellectual honesty and transparency. If a recommendation relies on some wildly optimistic assumption like, say, a 15% market growth rate.
Which consultants sometimes use.
Yes. The client can just grab that slider, pull it back to a more conservative 5% rate, and immediately see how the entire proposal's ROI might just fall apart. There's nowhere to hide unrealistic assumptions.
The deliverable stays alive then. It's not just a dusty document filed away after the big presentation.
Exactly. It becomes an ongoing shared instrument for decision support. The consultant's main job shifts to building the most flexible, transparent, and genuinely useful analytical tool possible, not just constructing the most convincing narrative. That's a fundamental cultural shift for the entire industry.
Okay, so if the pillars of the old model, hourly rates, knowledge asymmetry, static reports are crumbling, the solution has to be technology that makes time less relevant and amplifies context, right?
That's the idea.
So what does Meyer identify as the core technological foundations for this new reality?
Well, what's fascinating here is it's not just about, using AI for slightly better data entry or faster research. It's about building these comprehensive, intelligent, interconnected systems that can actually work autonomously towards complex goals.
Okay, let's get into that. Starting with Chapter 2, Agentic AI and Autonomous Systems. #A, Agentic AI and Autonomous Systems, Chapter 2.
Yeah, and the distinction here between a reactive tool and a true AI agent is really critical for people to grasp.
Because most people, when they think AI and consulting, they think maybe running a regression faster or summarizing a big document.
Right, and that's just scratching the surface. We need to refine the definition. A reactive tool, like even a sophisticated chatbot, it answers specific bounded questions. What were our sales in Q3? Or how big is the EV commercial vehicle market? Simple retrieval or calculation.
Okay. And an agent.
A true agent works autonomously toward a defined high-level goal. Something like Develop a well-founded market entry strategy for the EV commercial vehicle sector in Southeast Asia, assuming we have a $500 million investment budget.
Whoa, okay, that's way more complex. That implies a process involving judgment, planning, not just fetching data.
Exactly. It requires agency. And Meyer breaks down the capabilities that define this agency into basically 4 core areas.
Okay, what's the first?
First is autonomous problem analysis. The agent doesn't just sit there waiting for a human to outline every single step. It uses its training, maybe the consulting graph we'll talk about, to develop its own strategy. It breaks that big, high-level goal down into logical subproblems. It's like analyzing regulatory trends, researching specific battery tech innovations, assessing manufacturer capacity, figuring out infrastructure investment needs. It maps out the work itself.
Okay, so it plans the analysis. What's next?
Second, autonomous tool use. The agent acts like a mini project manager. It decides which specific tools to use for each subproblem, maybe querying APIs, internal databases, external regulatory files, and then it executes those queries without waiting for human instructions at every single step.
So it might decide, okay, I need predictive modeling here, sentiment analysis there, and just does it.
Precisely. It figures out the sequence and the necessity itself.
Right. Capability number 3.
Third is iterative learning and refinement. This is the crucial closed-loop system idea.
Meaning it learns as it goes.
Yes. The agent evaluates its own initial results.
Yeah.
Let's say the first set of data it finds on battery tech seems incomplete or maybe contradictory. It doesn't just stop. It automatically searches for alternative sources, weighs them for credibility based on its training.
And if a hypothesis doesn't pan out?
If a working hypothesis it developed, say about competitor reaction, fails based on new incoming data, the agent adjusts its entire approach. This ability to execute, evaluate, and then dynamically adjust is what really elevates it beyond simple automation. It's learning.
Okay. Analysis, tool use, learning. What's the 4th capability?
Fourth, coordination and escalation. Because complex consulting problems often require multiple specialized agents working together.
Like a team of AIs.
Sort of. You might have a data agent feeding information to a reasoning agent, which then informs a synthesis agent that pulls it all together. This complex orchestration is managed by a higher-level agent.
And that higher-level agent knows its limits.
Critically, yes. It's tasked with recognizing when a problem exceeds its own programmed capabilities, or maybe when a decision requires nuanced ethical or deep contextual human judgment. At that point, it escalates the issue to the human consultant, ideally with a complete summary of the situation and maybe some proposed options.
Okay, that structured autonomy, agents making sub-decisions. It raises some big questions, especially around oversight and control, right? If the agent is deciding methodology, prioritizing factors, how does the human consultant maintain quality and, frankly, fiduciary control over the advice?
That's a huge point, and Meyer emphasizes that this autonomy is disciplined, it's not anarchic. Control is maintained through several rigorous mechanisms. First, and most obviously, training on high-quality data.
Garbage in, garbage out still applies.
Absolutely. The agents aren't just trained on facts, they're trained on successful historical project outcomes. So they implicitly learn what good analysis and effective decision-making actually look like in practice.
Okay, so quality training data. What else?
Second, transparent logs and traceability. This is non-negotiable. Every single step the agent takes, every data query it runs, every hypothesis it tests, every sub-decision it makes has to be logged meticulously.
Why is that so important?
It ensures the human consultant can always trace the agent's reasoning path backward. They can verify how the conclusion was reached, ensuring the rationale is sound and not just some weird correlation the AI picked up. It's the difference between blindly trusting the algorithm and actually verifying its intellectual integrity.
Okay, makes sense. Traceability. Anything else?
And finally, guardrails. Clear constraints have to be programmed into the system from the outset.
Guardrails, like rules.
Exactly. These guardrails prevent the agent from drifting off into problematic decision spaces or making assumptions that aren't allowed. For example, a guardrail might state, all financial models must maintain a minimum confidence interval of 85%. Or maybe do not use any benchmark data from competitor A due to those ongoing litigation concerns.
So the humans set the strategic boundaries, ethical lines.
Right. The human consultant and the client set the strategic boundaries, the rules of the game. The agent then optimizes within those boundaries. And crucially, the final strategic decision, the ultimate gonna go, always remains with the human client, supported by the human consultant, but now empowered by the agent's incredibly efficient and thorough analysis. #TAGCAGB.
Yeah.
The Consulting Graph, the New Foundation, Chapter 3.
All right, so if the AI agent is the sort of dynamic brain doing the work, you mentioned something called the consulting graph. Is that like the memory, the nervous system?
That's a great analogy. The consulting graph is the persistent, networked nervous system. It supplies the institutional memory, the collective intelligence, the proprietary insights of the firm, and it addresses a huge inefficiency in traditional consulting,
Which,
which is that traditional consulting knowledge is totally fragmented and linear. It lives in siloed project reports, PowerPoint decks, maybe some disconnected databases.
Yeah.
A brilliant insight from Project A about, say, supply chain optimization in retail just sits in a PDF somewhere, completely disconnected from the hard-won knowledge gained in Project B about managing cultural transformation in banking.
and transferring that knowledge relies on people remembering things, talking to each other.
Yeah, it's laborious, often anecdotal, and incredibly hit or miss. The graph breaks down those silos. It's a networked architecture that continuously, dynamically connects four key elements in a relationship-oriented structure.
Okay, what are the four elements?
It connects data, D, frameworks, F, knowledge, W, and the AI systems or agents themselves.
DFWK. And Meyer has a formula, right? He says the result is multiplicative, not just additive.
Exactly. The formula is W dollars times W on times K consulting intelligence, and that multiplication factor is absolutely crucial.
Why multiplicative?
Because each element dramatically amplifies the utility and value of all the others.
Yeah.
Think of like a chain reaction. You can have great raw data, D, but it's pretty useless without a structured methodology or framework, F, to interpret it.
Right.
A brilliant framework, F, like Porter's 5 forces, is just abstract theory until you connect it to the historical context of its actual application, the successes and failures, W, to validate how and when it really works.
Okay.
And all three of those elements, data, frameworks, historical knowledge, they remain largely static and unscalable unless they're actively utilized and scaled by the AI agents. K. The graph is powerful because it reveals the relationships between things, not just isolated data points.
Interesting. So let's break down the four layers that feed this graph engine. Layer 1, the data layer. Is this just standard databases?
It's more than just SQL tables, though it includes standard enterprise data, market data, project-specific input, sure. But the absolute key here is that all data is contextualized with metadata. Instead of just storing a data point like sales are down 10%, the graph stores that fact connected to other nodes. Sales region, Northeast, channel, e-commerce, time period, Q3, and maybe, crucially, influenced by new regulatory change Y. This rich metadata connection allows the AI to query for causality, not just simple correlation. It understands the context.
Got it. Contextualized data. Layer 2 is the framework layer. This is where the firm's IP lives.
Exactly. This is where the proprietary methodologies, the intellectual property of the firm, gets codified. Porter's 5 forces, the BCG matrix, maybe specialized IT maturity models, unique M&A integration checklists, whatever the firm uses.
But how is it intelligent?
The intelligent part is that the framework isn't just stored as a definition. It's directly linked within the graph to its application history across potentially thousands of past projects. So for any given framework, the graph can instantly show when it was used, how it was adapted for different industries or client situations, and most importantly, when its application was predictive of success versus failure.
Wow, so it turns an abstract concept into a practical, context-aware tool with a track record.
Precisely. It knows the nuances of applying the theory.
Okay. Layer 3 is the knowledge layer. You said this is like the institutional memory.
It really is the heart of the graph. And this goes way beyond just summarizing old documents. It's about capturing structured project learnings, anonymized client case studies, logs of decision processes, and critically codified expert heuristics.
Expert heuristics, what do you mean by that?
Think about those judgment calls a senior partner makes based on 30 years of experience. They might say, look, in this specific type of M&A situation, experience tells me we absolutely have to prioritize cultural integration first, even over immediate financial synergies. That kind of nuanced, experience-based rule of thumb.
The stuff that's usually just in their head.
Exactly. That heuristic gets captured, analyzed, structured, and embedded into the graph, making that senior expertise scalable and reusable for the first time.
So when a senior expert eventually retires or leaves, their practical, hard-won experience doesn't just walk out the door with them.
Precisely. It remains captured, codified, and continuously enriching the firm's collective intelligence. It combats knowledge drain.
Okay, that's huge. And finally, layer 4, the AI agent layer. This is the engine.
This is the motor that activates everything else. It includes all those specialized agents we talked about, the reasoning agents generating strategic options, prediction agents forecasting futures, optimization agents running millions of scenarios, synthesis agents pulling complex insights together into understandable takeaways.
And they use the other layers.
Critically, yes. These agents don't operate in a vacuum. They actively query and utilize the interconnected data, frameworks, and knowledge layers in a highly targeted, intelligent way to achieve their goals.
So the ultimate shift here, Meyer argues, is moving from what he calls the static data world.
Yeah, the world of tables, SQL queries, looking for correlations, basically asking what happened.
To the dynamic graph world.
Right, which is all about relationships, connections, trying to understand causality, asking why did it happen, and even better, what happens if we change this? Or what's the optimal path forward?
Can you give a quick example of that difference, data world versus graph world?
Sure. The old data world system might show you that customer churn is suddenly high in the Midwest region. That's a correlation.
Okay.
The graph world, because it links data points, frameworks, and knowledge, can potentially explain why. It might reveal it's the specific combination of a new, aggressive competitor launching in that region and a recent, unresolved logistics snafu impacting deliveries there, a pattern it recognizes from historical project knowledge about logistics failure modes.
Ah, so it connects the dots to find the root cause.
Exactly. The causality becomes visible, or at least highly
Yeah.
probable. This kind of foundational graph infrastructure is absolutely essential for building the next generation of consulting tools and capabilities. #C, the digital consultant twin, Chapter 4.
Okay, this next concept, the digital consultant twin. This sounds like something out of science fiction, but Meyer presents it as a core part of the future. An AI agent individualized to replicate a specific consultant's expertise, their thought patterns.
It sounds futuristic, but it directly addresses maybe the single biggest bottleneck in high-value consulting: the sheer scarcity of senior expert time.
Right, the best partners are always maxed out.
Always. They're constrained by human limits. Only 24 hours in a day, can only be in one place at a time. The twin aims to break that limitation. It makes that scarce, high-value, nuanced expertise scalable and available 24/7.
But it's not just a generic expert AI, it's meant to mirror a specific person.
That's the key differentiator. It's not meant to be a generalist AI consultant. It's an AI that truly reflects the specific methodology, the domain mastery, the signature style of an individual star performer.
How on earth do you capture someone's signature style in an AI? What are the dimensions of this individualization process?
Meyer breaks it down into three main dimensions. First, obviously, specialized knowledge. This is the explicit, codified knowledge they've built up over years, often in a very narrow domain. For instance, you might build a twin for an expert, only focusing on supply chain optimization, specifically within the automotive sector, ignoring everything else. Deep, not broad.
Okay, deep domain expertise. What's second?
Second is project history and context. The twin is fed, in structured, anonymized ways, of course, the consultant's entire relevant career history. Their successes, yes, but also critically, their failures. The unique adaptations they made to standard frameworks in specific situations. The exceptions to the rules they learned to spot over decades.
So it learns not just the rules, but when to break the rules based on that specific consultant's experience.
Exactly, that's the nuance. And the third dimension is the most subtle, but maybe the most important: the individual thinking style or heuristic.
Their personal approach.
Yeah. This tries to capture the specific way the consultant approaches problems. Which frameworks do they implicitly favor or reach for first? Do they always start with analyzing the organizational structure before digging into the financials? What's their typical risk profile? Do they tend towards conservative or more aggressive assumptions? What's their unique sequence for tackling complex, ambiguous problems? Capturing that signature process is key to replicating their specific value.
Okay, the concept is fascinating. And Meyer makes a compelling case for the economic leverage this provides. But let's be realistic. The upfront investment here sounds massive. And feeding years of potentially sensitive client project data into an AI twin, doesn't that raise enormous risks around intellectual property and data security?
Oh, absolutely it does. Huge IP and governance challenges, which is precisely why Meyer dedicates a whole section later in the book to ethics, focusing heavily on things like strict client data separation and robust anonymization protocols. It's a major hurdle.
A necessary hurdle to clear, presumably.
Yes. But if we just park the ethical and security implementation challenges for a moment and look purely at the economics, the argument Meyer makes is staggering. It's potentially powerful enough to justify tackling those complex implementation hurdles.
Okay, lay out the economics for us. What's the cost comparison?
All right, let's look at the leverage ratio. A top-tier human senior consultant, when you factor in everything, salary, bonus, benefits, social contributions, office space, support staff, standard overhead, utilization rates cost the organization roughly, let's say, 450,000 to maybe 500,000 annually, conservatively.
Okay. And that €500,000 asset is constrained by what, maybe 2,000 billable hours a year max?
Right, finite human capacity. Now compare that to the digital twin. After the initial development investment, which is not trivial, Meyer estimates maybe 50,000 to 100,000 euro to properly train and personalize the base model for a specific expert.
Okay, significant setup cost.
Significant, yes. But after that, the annual operating costs, things like server time, cloud computing, ongoing maintenance, API licensing drop dramatically, maybe down to around 30,000 to 50,000 per year.
So wait, 500K a year for the human versus potentially 50K a year run rate for the twin?
Roughly, yes. You're looking at something like a 9.1 or even 10.1 cost ratio for essentially equivalent analytical horsepower available 2047.
That's a massive difference. And the capacity itself increases too, right? It's not just cheaper.
Crucially, yes. The twin doesn't just replicate, it augments. Meyer estimates the twin could realistically take over 30% to 40% of that senior consultant's routine analytical drudgery.
Like what?
Like data gathering, initial benchmarking, running standard scenario calculations, maybe even generating the first draft of report sections, freeing up the human expert.
So the human consultant gets 30–40% of their time back.
Exactly. It dramatically increases their effective capacity to focus on the high-value stuff, client interaction, complex problem-solving, judgment calls. And this allows the organization to significantly increase its overall leverage ratio.
Meaning more junior staff per senior.
Right. If a firm traditionally runs, say, a 4.1 ratio of junior consultants to senior partners, the twin acts like an instant force multiplier. That partner, augmented by their twin, might now be able to effectively manage the output, provide quality oversight for maybe 6.1 or even 8.1 junior staff without completely burning out.
Okay, the ultimate impact then is the organization captures decades of that senior embedded expertise, preserves it, makes it continuously available, infinitely scalable, and technologically bypasses the fundamental bottleneck of finite human time.
That's the vision. It completely changes the financial model. You move away from a linear revenue stream based on selling hours towards a potentially exponential model based on leveraging intelligence. It's a profound shift in the economics of expertise.
All right, so we have these powerful new technological foundations, agents, graphs, twins. But technology alone isn't enough. It has to be translated into a fundamentally new way of actually doing the work, managing the projects.
Exactly, which means tearing up the old project management rulebook.
Right.
And that brings us to Chapter 5, Adaptive Playbooks.
Adaptive playbooks. Why is this so critical for project managers and consultants on the ground?
Because, as anyone who's managed a complex project knows, static playbooks are inherently rigid and, frankly, quite fragile in the real world.
You mean the standard templates for, say, an ERP implementation or a post-merger integration?
Yeah, those massive binders or shared drives full of checklists and standard phases. The problem is they tend to assume a one-size-fits-all approach. They can't easily account for the messy reality that client A might have really high IT maturity and flat, fast decision-making hierarchies.
While client B is the opposite.
Right. While client B is maybe a legacy corporation, deeply siloed, with extremely low readiness for change, terrible data quality, and complex, slow approval structures. The traditional playbook just doesn't flex well for that variability.
So consultants end up improvising constantly.
They do. They make brilliant adaptations on the fly. But those valuable improvisational learnings, those tweaks to the standard process that actually worked in a specific context, they're rarely captured systematically. They just evaporate after the project ends.
Okay, so adaptive playbooks are designed to fix that, to be learning systems.
Exactly. They're designed as dynamic learning systems with built-in conditional logic. They ensure the project plan and execution actually adjust based on the real-time, evolving reality of the client's situation.
How do they work? What are the building blocks that enable that dynamism?
Meyer outlines several key components. First, you need the foundational inputs. That starts with baseline knowledge, the standard phases, tasks, and recognize best practices for a given type of transformation, like an ERP rollout.
The standard playbook, basically.
Sort of the starting point, yes. But then comes the crucial second input, systematic client profiling. Before the project even kicks off, the client is assessed across a whole range of structured dimensions,
Like what kind of dimensions?
maybe 30 to 50 different factors. Quantitative IT maturity scores, qualitative change readiness metrics based on surveys, objective data quality assessments, stakeholder complexity indexes mapping out decision makers. This rich profile provides the specific initial conditions for this client.
Okay, so you have the standard baseline and the specific client profile. How does that make the playbook adaptive?
It allows the system to move into the execution phase with intelligent adjustments already baked in from day one. This happens through decision trees and conditional logic.
If-then rules.
Basically, yes. The system applies if-then rules that have been learned and refined from the firm's historical project data stored in that consulting graph we discussed. For example, a rule might say, if the client profiling reveals beta quality equals poor ND change readiness equal low.
A dangerous combination.
A very dangerous combination. Then phase 3, which might be data migration and cleansing, is automatically extended by, say, 60% of the baseline estimated time. And the system automatically inserts an additional dedicated task, maybe a data governance alignment sprint, right before that phase begins.
So the roadmap adapts automatically and transparently based on the evidence from the profile.
Exactly. No more discovering 3 months in that the data is unusable. The risk is anticipated, and the plan adjusts up front.
But projects are dynamic, things change midstream. How does the playbook handle real-time feedback?
That's where KPI monitoring and feedback loops come in. They have to be constant, not just milestone reviews. The system continuously tracks real-time progress against key metrics.
What kind of metrics?
Could be anything relevant. Software test coverage rates, bug density in development sprints, stakeholder alignment scores based on quick pulse surveys, user adoption rates for new processes.
And if those KPIs start going off track,
If deviations occur, the system doesn't just flag it. It adjusts the subsequent phases of the project plan proactively. For example, if the testing phase starts running significantly behind schedule,
which it often does.
the system doesn't wait for the weekly human project meeting to raise the alarm. It immediately recalculates the downstream impact and alerts the team. Warning: due to a 20% delay in completing test coverage, the calculated risk of missing the go-live date has increased from 15% to 30%. Recommendation: reallocate 2 resources from the upcoming Phase 5 back to Phase 4 for 1 dedicated week to accelerate testing.
Wow. Okay. So it's giving real-time probabilistic guidance, not just reporting historical problems.
Exactly. That proactive quantitative risk assessment is crucial. And the AI can go even further, moving beyond just simple if-then rules.
How so?
Through AI-supported recommendations. By analyzing patterns across thousands of historical projects stored in that deep consulting graph, the AI models can identify subtle, nonlinear interaction effects, things a human consultant, even an experienced one, might easily miss.
Like what kind of nonlinear effects?
For instance, the system might discover from past data that having low IT maturity isn't just a problem, and having low change readiness isn't just a problem. But the combination of low IT maturity and low change readiness isn't just an additive risk, 1 + 1 = 2. It's actually a multiplicative risk, 1 + 1 = 5. That specific combination might be 5 times more likely to cause project failure than either factor would suggest in isolation.
So the AI finds these hidden interaction risks.
Yes, and it provides probabilistic, proactive guidance based on that deep historical evidence. It ensures the project team isn't just following a checklist, but is actively optimizing the plan based on the patterns learned from countless prior engagements. It moves project management from being a static checklist to being a living, learning, self-correcting system.
Okay, this technological leap, the agents doing analysis, the graph holding knowledge, the playbooks adapting it, inevitably forces a complete rethink of the human consultant's role, doesn't it?
Completely. If the AI is handling the heavy lifting on the analytical side, processing vast amounts of data, generating scenarios, doing the primary diagnosis, then what is the human consultant's new high-value purpose? Where do they uniquely contribute?
Meyer calls this the fundamental shift from analyst to curator. Is that right?
That's the core concept. From analyst to curator, because the AI will generate analytical abundance, maybe 20 technically correct, factually robust insights or recommendations per hour. Just a fire hose of information.
Which can be overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming. So the human consultant, acting as the curator, performs 4 profoundly human tasks that AI, at least for the foreseeable future, cannot.
Okay, what are the 4 tasks?
First, selection. Sifting through that abundance and selecting the maybe 3 insights that are truly relevant and impactful for this specific client in this specific moment. Second, arrangement. taking those selected insights and arranging them into a coherent, compelling narrative that the client can actually understand, absorb, and act upon.
Okay, selection and arrangement. What else?
Third, contextualization. This is huge. It's about layering on that deep human intuition and understanding of the client's internal world. Knowing, for example, that the CEO will instinctively resist a certain recommendation if it's perceived as undermining a pet project or a previous strategic decision they championed, the AI won't know that.
Right, the political and emotional context.
Exactly.
Okay.
And fourth, feasibility assessment. Looking beyond the analytical optimum to assess what is actually implementable in this specific corporate culture with these specific people, given their history and constraints. It's about managing the psychological and political bottlenecks of change.
And those bottlenecks, they actually become relatively more important as the pure analysis part speeds up, right? The human side becomes the constraint.
Precisely. The curator isn't just asking, what does the data say? They're asking the harder questions. What is truly urgent here? What is politically and culturally feasible in this specific organization? And what is the story that will actually catalyze action, not just be admired as a clever analysis?
And that requires judgment, deep emotional intelligence.
And above all, the kind of deep client trust that simply cannot be algorithmically generated. It's earned over time through human relationship.
So this shift, it doesn't just change the tasks, it actually fragments the old monolithic consultant role into new, more specialized profiles.
Yes, it does. Meyer argues the single consultant title becomes less meaningful. Instead, human energy gets focused into several distinct, specialized roles where uniquely human judgment is absolutely irreplaceable.
What are some of these new specialized roles he identifies?
Okay, first there's the consulting architect. This is a really interesting hybrid role. This person is the most tech-savvy of the consultants. They're the ones who actually design and build the cognitive systems. They translate the firm's strategic frameworks, its proprietary methodologies, into machine-readable structures for the AI. They define the critical guardrails for the AI agents. They select the optimal LLMs or knowledge-based structures for a particular type of problem. They are the essential bridge connecting deep domain expertise with deep technology understanding.
Okay, the architect. Who else?
Second, the transformation coach. This role becomes much more prominent. They focus almost exclusively on the human factors, managing emotions, shaping culture, overcoming resistance to change. Since the analysis phase gets compressed so dramatically by AI.
The human adoption phase becomes the bottleneck.
Exactly. The transformation coach ensures the organization is psychologically and culturally prepared to actually implement the changes that the architect, the agents, and the curator recommend. They manage the people side of change.
Makes sense. Role number 3.
Third, the ethics officer. This isn't just a compliance function anymore. It's an operational necessity for maintaining trust. They actively monitor the AI systems for inherited biases. They ensure strict compliance with data protection regulations, especially that critical client data separation we talked about.
And they challenge the AI's recommendations.
Yes. Critically, they ensure the recommendations are ethically defensible. They act as a check against the AI, becoming just an opaque justification machine for predetermined or problematic decisions. For instance, they'd challenge an algorithm if it started systematically recommending layoff strategies that inadvertently targeted older workers based on biased productivity data proxies. They guard the integrity of the output.
Okay, vital role. And the fourth one?
Fourth is the account strategist. You can think of this as the evolution of the traditional senior partner role. Their focus shifts away from direct analysis delivery and purely towards orchestration. Maintaining that deep client trust, managing the overall strategic relationship, navigating complexity. In a world increasingly driven by algorithms and data, the client desperately needs a trusted human navigator to interpret it all and provide ultimate accountability.
So, architect, coach, ethics officer, strategist, this collection of roles, it defines a completely new way of working, doesn't it?
It really does. The new way of working is inherently iterative, interactive, and agile right from the very start. Analysis and change support activities run in parallel, concurrently, not in rigid sequential phases like the old waterfall model.
And the interaction with the client changes.
Dramatically. The consultant needs to be comfortable working live with the client, manipulating that interactive dashboard together in a meeting, maybe instructing specialized AI agents in real time to explore different scenarios during a workshop. It fosters this continuous, transparent dialogue between the human experts, the machine intelligence, and the client decision makers. It's a much more collaborative and dynamic process.
Okay, we've covered the systemic breakdown, the new technologies, the transformed roles and operating models. Now let's follow the money. The death of the hourly model means we need radically new business structures. So, what does this all actually mean for the economics of consulting? For the bottom line?
Yeah, this is where the rubber really meets the road. The core economic premise driving the change is simple, conceptually at least. You have to move away from paying for input, basically, consultant time, and start paying for output measurable value delivered.
Value-based pricing, essentially.
Exactly. And Meyer outlines three dominant new business models that he sees replacing, or at least significantly supplementing, the traditional hourly rate. These models potentially enable both higher profitability for the consultancy and more predictable value for the client.
Okay, let's get into them. Model one is consulting as a service, or CaaS. Now, you mentioned Robert Meyer himself is actively building a CaaS platform for release in 2026, so he clearly believes strongly in this one. How does CaaS actually work?
CaaS essentially takes the subscription model, borrowing heavily from the playbook of the successful software as a service, SaaS world, and applies it to consulting. It would likely involve tiered pricing structures.
Like different levels of service.
Yeah, maybe ranging from, say, 15,000 hows a month for a basic tier up to maybe 60,000 a month or more for a premium tier, depending on the client's size, complexity, and needs. In return for that recurring fee, clients get continuous, predictable access to a bundle of services.
What's typically in the bundle?
Usually three core components. First, access to recurring AI agents. These are AI systems performing continuous, often standardized analyses for the client, things like monthly market share benchmarking, quarterly competitor threat assessments, maybe even daily supply chain risk monitoring. Automated intelligence on tap.
Okay, automated insights. What else?
Second, access to standardized tools and adaptive playbooks. Clients get to license and use the consultancy's proprietary systems, those interactive dashboards, the adaptive project playbooks we discussed. This allows them to run their own scenarios, manage some of their own projects using the consultancy's codified best practices and methodologies. It empowers the client.
Right. And the third component, still need humans.
Absolutely. Third, usually a contingent of human consulting time is included in the monthly retainer. This is for the high-touch stuff, complex strategic interventions, deep-dive problem-solving workshops, senior executive coaching, interpreting the most complex AI outputs. You still need the human curator and strategist.
Okay, so for the client, it means predictable costs and continuous access to intelligence and tools. What's the big win for the consultancy?
It fundamentally changes their revenue profile. You move away from the lumpy, unpredictable project-based fees.
The feast or famine cycle.
Exactly. Towards highly predictable, stable, annual recurring revenue, or ARR, just like a SaaS company. This smooths out cash flow dramatically, makes financial planning easier, and importantly, often results in much higher business valuation multiples from investors. It also aligns the consultancy's long-term financial health much more closely with the client's ongoing success, not just the duration of a single project.
Okay, kind of fast sounds like a strong contender. What's the second model Meyer outlines?
The second model is the potentially high reward, but also definitely high-risk approach. Outcome-based pricing,
Paying for results.
directly paying for results. Here, the consultancy's payment, or at least a significant portion of it, is explicitly tied to achieving specific, measurable, client-agreed-upon outcomes.
Give me an example.
Okay, payment might be contingent on achieving a specific operational target, like reducing customer churn rate from 15% to below 10% within 18 months, or maybe increasing supply chain throughput by a verified 25% over 2 years, or hitting a certain market share goal after a new product launch.
That sounds incredibly risky for the consultancy, though. What if they don't hit the target for reasons outside their control?
It is risky, which is why the structure has to be very carefully designed. Typically involves three components: a lower base fee, paid regardless, just to cover the consultancy's basic operating costs and ensure they don't go broke. Then, a much larger success fee, payable only upon achieving the pre-agreed measurable outcome. And potentially, there might even be a mutually agreed upon penalty clause or some kind of repayment structure if the goals are significantly missed.
So why would consultancies even consider this given the risk? How does AI make this more viable than it was in the past?
AI is the key enabler here, because the AI systems, especially the predictive models drawing on that deep consulting graph, give the consultancy far superior predictive analysis capabilities before they even sign the contract.
Ah, they can assess the odds better up front.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The AI allows them to much more accurately assess the true difficulty of achieving the outcome, the probability of success given the client's specific situation, remember that profiling, the likely risks involved, and the necessary resource investment required from their side. It helps them price the risk premium appropriately.
So the AI essentially de-risks the outcome-based contract for the consultancy by giving them better foresight.
Precisely. And it doesn't stop there. During the project itself, the AI can continuously monitor progress against those specific outcome KPIs in real time. If things start deviating from the required success path,
The AI flags it early.
yes, enabling the human consultants to intervene quickly, deploy countermeasures, and get the project back on track towards hitting the target outcome that triggers the big success fee. AI makes managing outcome-based contracts feasible in a way they really weren't before.
Okay, KA for predictable revenue, outcome-based for high reward potential. What's the third model? You said it was the most radical shift.
The third model represents the most fundamental shift, developing and selling AI products and licensing models. This is where the consultancy moves, at least partially, from selling service hours to selling scalable software.
Like packaging their expertise into an AI product?
Exactly. Instead of sending a team of consultants for 3 months to optimize a retailer's margins, the consultancy develops and licenses a specific AI product, maybe called the Retail Margin Optimizer Agent. Or they might offer a CFO copilot system that provides continuous financial insights and forecasting.
And they sell these as software subscriptions.
Yes, typically on a recurring subscription basis, just like any SaaS product. Pricing might range from, say, €500 a month for a basic tool, up to €10,000 a month or more for a sophisticated AI copilot, depending on the features and the value delivered.
And the strategic advantage here for the consultancy is?
Scalability and margins. This model allows consultancies to tap into the economics of software. They can achieve typical SaaS gross margins, often in the 70% to 80% range, which are way higher than traditional consulting margins. And they can achieve exponential growth dynamics, selling the same software product to hundreds or thousands of clients, something that's simply impossible in the traditional service delivery model, which scales linearly with headcount.
So, CaaS, outcome-based AI products. Which model does Meyer think will win?
He suggests the reality for most firms, at least in the medium term, will be a hybrid model. They'll likely adopt a portfolio approach.
A mix and match.
Yeah. Maybe the revenue breaks down something like 30% still from traditional bespoke project work for highly complex, unique problems, 40% from scalable CaaS subscriptions providing recurring revenue, 20% from high-risk, high-reward outcome-based projects, and maybe 10% or more from licensing their own AI software products. The exact mix will depend on the firm's strategy, risk appetite, and client base. But the key is diversification away from relying solely on the billable hour. #B. The Ethical Compass, Chapter 9.
Okay, these new models, especially CaaS and AI products, they dramatically increase the power and scalability of consulting insights and recommendations, which surely makes ethical governance and transparency absolutely critical, right?
Non-negotiable. Meyer is very clear on this. Ethics moves from being a background compliance issue or a nice-to-have to becoming a core operational challenge and ultimately a source of competitive advantage.
Why the increased urgency around ethics now?
For 3 main reasons related to AI's nature. First, scale. A flaw, a bias, or an error in a centralized AI system used by a consultancy doesn't just affect one client project. It could potentially impact hundreds, maybe thousands, of client organizations simultaneously. The blast radius for mistakes is massively amplified.
Okay, scale amplifies risk. What's second?
Second is authority and automation bias. These AI systems will be incredibly sophisticated, generating recommendations based on analyzing more data than any human team ever could. This creates a real risk of automation bias.
Meaning people just trust the machine too much.
Exactly. Even highly intelligent, experienced professionals can develop a tendency to overly trust the machine's output simply because the algorithm says so. This makes it harder to critically question potentially flawed or biased recommendations generated at high speed. The AI's perceived authority can stifle human oversight.
And the third reason, the black box problem.
Yes. Third is in transparency. Some advanced AI models, particularly deep learning models, can be notoriously opaque, the black box phenomenon. It can be incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to understand exactly why the model reached a specific conclusion. This lack of transparency makes it hard to debug errors, identify biases, and crucially, assign responsibility when things go wrong.
Okay, scale, authority bias, opacity, those are serious challenges. How does Meyer propose consultancies should structure their ethical response? What are the pillars of an ethical AI strategy?
He structures the necessary response around 4 critical pillars. The first, and perhaps most fundamental, is transparency.
Transparency about what?
Multiple levels of transparency are needed. Data transparency, clearly citing the sources of data used in the analysis. Method transparency, explaining the type of AI model used. Was it simple regression, a time series forecast, a complex neural network? Clients need to understand the underlying logic. Assumption transparency, making all the key assumptions about external factors, market conditions, etc., explicit and challengeable. And critically, uncertainty transparency.
Uncertainty transparency?
Yeah, this means honestly communicating the level of confidence or the uncertainty range around AI-generated forecasts or predictions, not providing falsely precise single-point answers, sales will be $10 and 5 cents, but rather confidence intervals. We are 90% confident sales will be between $9.08 and $11.02. It's about intellectual honesty regarding the limits of the prediction.
Okay, transparency is pillar one. What's pillar two?
Pillar 2 directly addresses fairness and bias mitigation. This is huge. AI models learn from historical data, and unfortunately, historical data also reflects past societal biases, gender bias, racial bias, age bias, etc.
So the AI can inherit and even amplify those biases.
Absolutely. An ethical consultancy must implement proactive measures. This includes pre-training bias checks,
Right.
rigorously examining the historical data used to train the models, looking for and mitigating systemic biases before the model is even built, and then post-training bias audits, actively testing the trained model's outcomes across different relevant demographic groups where appropriate and legal to ensure it doesn't produce unfair or discriminatory results.
Can they look inside the black box to find bias?
Increasingly, yes. They must also leverage explainability tools. Techniques like S-shape or LIME allow consultants to peer inside the model to some extent and understand precisely which input features, which data points most strongly influenced a particular decision or recommendation. This helps ensure the rationale is based on legitimate business factors, not accidental correlations linked to protected characteristics like age or gender.
Okay, transparency, fairness, and bias mitigation. Pillar three.
Pillar 3 focuses on data protection and privacy. This is already critical, but it becomes even more complex with AI analyzing vast, potentially sensitive, proprietary client information.
What are the key principles here?
It demands strict adherence to principles like data minimization, only collecting and using data that's strictly necessary, robust anonymization and pseudonymization techniques wherever possible, strong encryption at rest and in transit. But perhaps the biggest operational challenge Meyer highlights is ensuring strict client data separation, meaning client A's highly confidential competitive market data, or their internal employee data, must never, under any circumstances, leak, bleed over, or inadvertently inform the analysis being done for client B, even if it's anonymized. This requires state-of-the-art technical partitioning, access controls, and really clear governance frameworks that prioritize client confidentiality above all else. Breaching this trust would be catastrophic.
Absolutely. Okay, and the final pillar. Pillar four. Pillar four.
Pillar 4 addresses the fundamental question of responsibility and governance. When an AI-driven recommendation leads to a negative outcome, who is ultimately accountable?
The consultant, the AI vendor, the client who accepted the advice.
Meyer is clear. Responsibility has to be shared. It's not solely on one party. It rests collectively with the consulting organization for building, testing, and auditing a high-quality ethical system, the individual human consultant for applying critical review, contextual judgment, and ensuring appropriate use, and ultimately the client for making the final strategic decision based on the advice received.
How do you operationalize that shared responsibility?
It requires formal governance structures. Meyer advocates for things like establishing a dedicated internal ethics committee with real teeth, creating clear escalation paths for any employee or even an AI agent itself to raise ethical concerns, and conducting regular mandated audits of AI systems and their outputs by independent parties.
So ethics isn't just a policy document, it's an active operational process.
Exactly. Ultimately, Meyer argues, embedding this kind of rigorous ethical compass isn't just about avoiding risk or meeting compliance requirements. It becomes a powerful long-term competitive advantage. It builds the one thing that sophisticated algorithms and vast data sets cannot replicate on their own: deep, enduring client trust. And in the future of consulting, trust may be the most valuable currency of all.
Okay, we've journeyed through the crumbling foundations of old consulting, explored the powerful new technologies like agents and graphs, seen the transformation in roles and operating models, and grasped the new economic and ethical imperatives. Now, in the final chapters, Meyer pulls back the lens even further to reveal his grand vision for the entire future of the industry, what he calls the networked consulting ecosystem, or Blueprint 2030.
Yeah, this is where he argues that the future isn't about individual monolithic consulting firms competing in isolation anymore. That siloed approach, he believes, is becoming economically untenable, especially when faced with the sheer complexity of modern global challenges.
Why untenable?
Two main reasons. First, massive redundancy. Right now, you have dozens of major firms and countless smaller ones, all independently spending fortunes trying to solve the exact same highly specific, specialized problems over and over again, whether it's optimizing semiconductor supply chains or navigating new ESG regulations. It's incredibly inefficient at an industry level.
Reinventing the wheel constantly.
Constantly. Second, complexity exceeding capacity. Many of today's most critical business problems think about navigating the energy transition, or truly global supply chain resilience incorporating geopolitical risk, are simply too complex and multifaceted for any single firm, no matter how large, to possess all the necessary deep expertise internally.
So the future requires collaboration, not just competition.
Exactly. The future, Meyer envisions, is decentralized and collaborative. It's an ecosystem where cooperation between firms, even competitors, actually create more value for everyone, including the clients, than the old zero-sum competitive battles.
Okay, that's a radical vision. How does he see this decentralized network actually functioning in practice? What are the building blocks of this Blueprint 2030 ecosystem?
He outlines several key components that would need to be built, likely over the next decade. First, a common knowledge base.
Shared knowledge across firms. How would that work?
He envisions a secure, distributed system, maybe using advanced technologies like federated learning or privacy-preserving vector databases, where member firms can contribute highly structured, rigorously anonymized learnings from their projects. What worked, what failed, why it failed in a specific context.
But why would firms share their valuable knowledge?
They'd need to be incentivized, probably through contribution tiers or maybe micropayments. Firms that contribute high-quality, validated learnings gain privileged access to the broader pool. The goal is to create this incredible collective intelligence treasure trove that no single firm could ever hope to accumulate on its own.
Okay, a shared brain for the industry. That directly tackles the redundancy and knowledge asymmetry problems at a systemic level. What's the second building block?
Second, interoperable AI agents. We need a functional, trusted marketplace where firms can license specialized AI agents developed by others.
Like an app store for consulting AI.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine a small, highly specialized boutique firm develops the world's absolute best renewable energy grid optimization agent. That agent could potentially be licensed by any larger firm through this marketplace and integrated into their own client solutions via a standardized agent communication protocol.
So a big firm wouldn't have to build every single specialized AI capability in-house. They could plug and play the best modules from the network.
Exactly. It facilitates hyper-specialization and allows for much more rapid deployment of cutting-edge capabilities across the entire ecosystem, benefiting clients faster.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What's building block number 3?
Third, common data infrastructure. This addresses the high cost of essential external data. The ecosystem could facilitate shared licensing agreements for expensive resources that many firms need.
Like what?
Like premium market research databases, global regulatory tracking feeds, sophisticated financial benchmarks, or industry-specific sentiment analysis data. By pooling resources, the cost per firm drops dramatically, and it ensures all participants in the ecosystem are working from a consistent, high-quality baseline data set, leveling the playing field somewhat.
Okay, shared knowledge, shared agents, shared data. What else?
Fourth, an open playbook library. Meyer suggests that many core methodologies and project roadmaps, the basic structures for common transformations, could eventually become treated more like open-source assets.
Open source consulting methods. Really?
Potentially, yes. They could be jointly developed, maintained, and improved by the community of practitioners within the ecosystem. If the basic how-to frameworks are open, then competition shifts away from just owning the framework itself and towards differentiation based on superior expertise in adapting, contextualizing, and implementing those frameworks using the best agents and human talent.
Interesting. Shifting competition up the value chain. And the final building block.
Finally, and maybe most importantly, the talent network. The ecosystem needs mechanisms to allow highly specialized human experts to contribute their skills more flexibly across traditional organizational boundaries.
Like freelancers, but highly integrated.
Sort of, but potentially more structured. Imagine a world-renowned expert in applying behavioral economics to prevent internal corporate fraud. Through the network, they could be brought in for a specific 3-week engagement by firm X for client Y, even if their primary affiliation is elsewhere. The system ensures the client always gets access to the absolute best combined expertise for their specific problem, regardless of which single firm happens to hold the primary account relationship.
Wow. Okay, so if you put all those pieces together, shared knowledge, interoperable agents, common data, open playbooks, fluid talent, the nature of competition in the consulting industry changes completely.
Fundamentally, Meyer argues it's no longer about who is the biggest firm with the most consultants and the most proprietary databases locked away in a silo.
Instead, the winning proposition becomes,
Instead, it becomes who is best at orchestrating the optimal combination of specialized human talent, AI agents, data resources, and methodologies pulled dynamically from the network to solve this specific client's problem most effectively and efficiently. It's about being the best network orchestrator, not the biggest silo.
okay, that's a compelling, if challenging, vision for 2030. So, wrapping up, what's Meyer's final message in the book's conclusion?
His concluding message is really both urgent and fundamentally optimistic. He reiterates that this AI revolution, while disruptive, should not be viewed primarily as a threat to the consulting profession. Instead, he frames it as a truly historic opportunity.
An opportunity to do what?
An opportunity to finally lift consulting to a new level of value creation, to make it demonstrably more transparent, more rigorously ethical, and exponentially more valuable to clients, because the focus shifts decisively towards delivering measurable outcomes and driving real structural change, rather than just selling analytical hours and presentation decks.
And for the human consultant, is it liberation or obsolescence?
Meyer argues strongly for liberation. The AI takes over the analytical grunt work, the laborious data processing and benchmarking that often burns people out. This liberates the human consultant to focus entirely on the activities where humans excel and add unique value. Deep contextual understanding, applying intuition and judgment, taking ethical responsibility, and navigating the incredibly difficult, messy human work of managing organizational change and building trust.
But the timeline is tight.
The timeline is tight. He stresses that the next 5 years are absolutely decisive. Firms need to start building these new capabilities now. They need to be experimenting with cost models, investing in their consulting graph infrastructure, training their people for the new curator and architect roles, and beginning to forge the partnerships and protocols needed for that future network ecosystem. Waiting is not a viable strategy. So I think the key takeaway from Meyer for every executive and consultant listening to us today is really this. Paradoxically, the human element becomes more critical, not less, in this increasingly technologized future for consulting.
Why more critical?
Because as the analytical power of AI becomes commoditized, clients won't just need data processors. They will desperately need trusted human navigators, people who can help them interpret the overwhelming complexity, manage the fear and uncertainty that comes with rapid change, and provide the wisdom and accountability that algorithms alone can never offer.
That's a powerful closing thought. And Robert Meyer, he provides the full, detailed blueprint and a practical implementation roadmap for making this transformation happen in his book, The AI Revolution in Consulting. Rethinking Consulting. We strongly recommend it. If you're a C-level executive, a partner at a firm, or a consultant thinking about your future, this really is required reading to understand how to position your organization and yourself for success in 2030 and beyond.
And remember, he's not just theorizing, he's actively building his own CaaS platform based on these principles, targeting a 2026 launch. So he's putting his money where his mouth is.
The book is The AI Revolution in Consulting. Rethinking Consulting, first edition, published November 2025. Look for ISBN 979-827-3604-773. It details the entire architecture, from the digital twin concept right through to the blueprint 2030 ecosystem vision.
Meyer concludes by saying the biggest failure in the coming 5 years won't be a lack of technology. It will be a failure of imagination and a lack of organizational courage to embrace this change.
So here's where it gets really interesting and maybe something for you to ponder. In this new ecosystem Meyer describes, will the most successful consulting firm of the future look more like a super efficient AI-driven hedge fund, ruthlessly optimizing outcomes? Or will it look more like the conductor of a highly specialized, globally distributed orchestra, bringing together unique talents for bespoke performances? Maybe it's both. That's the future we need to build.